Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, RockAuto.com, and State Farm. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and welcome everyone to MotorWeek podcast number 212. And we're in Studio C at MotorWeek World Headquarters. And around our table today is writer-producer Brian Robinson.
Hello, John.
Our online content coordinator, Greg Carlos.
That's me.
And our assistant road test producer, Kyle Scanlon.
Hey there.
We're going to talk about a couple of Porsches, a Nissan, and something really special from Brian Robinson, a Ducati that he's had a devil of a time with. But let's start off really with an update of a very special car that we gave you a preview of on our previous podcast. We're talking about the Porsche Taycan, Porsche's first all-electric car. We now have more details about the car than we had during our first drive a couple of weeks ago. And for that, the person that has had the most experience with actually crawling through an almost production model is Greg Carlos. Take it away, Greg.
All right. So, yeah, Porsche did something a little bit different with this car launch. So Garrick drove it, like we mentioned last time, in Germany. I went down to their Porsche Experience Center in Atlanta, where they're based out of in North America. And we did a technical workshop, and it was about 6 hours of German engineers giving us every single little detail about the Taycan. And, you know, I like to think I'm a fairly smart person, but after that, I felt like I was kind of overloaded.
You didn't get the full experience. It's better after you fly overnight to Germany and then do that first thing in the morning.
When you can't be absolutely groggy as heck.
So, in front of me, I actually have just pages and pages of notes. I'll try and hit the highlights, but if you have any questions, I'm sure I have the answer in these notes. Last time we had mentioned some driving impressions. Now we have some actual figures. We'll start with the lithium-ion battery pack, which is a 93 kilowatt hour. That equals, and we don't have EPA range yet. Porsche's still waiting on it, but we do have European range figures. And for the turbo model, there's actually two models, and they keep with the same naming scheme of other Porsches, Turbo and Turbo S. Maximum possible range is 450 kilometers, which equals 280. Like you said, John, I think we could probably expect maybe a little bit more.
Yeah,
to 300.
The EPA numbers are likely to be higher, so it's going to. They had talked about being over 300 mile range, and it looks like they're probably there.
So torque is really the big deal with electric cars. And here there's up to 774 pound-feet of it in overboost.
Put that in perspective, that's just about what a lot of people will buy a diesel pickup truck for.
Yeah, that
turbo diesel pickup truck.
That is a ton of torque.
So you can tow a trailer with it? Is that
they did not. That's one. They did not give us that. So horsepower, we're looking at starting at 616 base horsepower.
That's base.
Yeah, that's base horsepower in a turbo. That's before overboost. So you can get that for up to 10 seconds.
Wow.
And then when you overboost in a Turbo S, you're looking at 750 horsepower, which again is just for a ton of horsepower.
It's just an amazing amount of power.
So,
and this is not that big a vehicle.
Actually, so it's over 5,000 pounds.
So, I mean, but
it's a big
size-wise,
vehicle.
Is it larger than a Panamera?
It's shorter than a Panamera, so it's lower than a Panamera. It's when you look at it, it's substantial. Not as big as a Panamera. You can tell that right away, but it's really wide, massive tires on the back of the Turbo S model. I think they're like 305s. Staggered wheels. Another thing, 21-inch wheels on Turbo S, 20-inch wheels on the Turbo, which is actually what they attributed the drop in ranges between the models was actually mostly wheel size. So back to the performance stuff. With all those numbers, 616 horsepower, blah, 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 700 some pound-feet of torque, we're talking about 0 to 60 times of 2.6 seconds in Turbo S models.
So motorcycle grade, performance motorcycle grade acceleration.
And that's using launch control, which I experienced, which is kind of funny in a electric vehicle because I was expecting when the test driver did it, when you do it in any other Porsche, the revs climb up to 5,000. It's an experience. This I was ready, and then just like nothing really happened except a ding, and then you just take off like a bat out of hell. It's pretty wild.
Are they calling this a hypercar?
They are not calling it a hypercar. They kept using the term sports car.
Supercar?
Sports car.
Sports car.
Yeah, they're not even calling it supercar because they just. I mean, I think while it's so great that it's an EV, it's the first one for Porsche. At the end of the day, it's a Porsche. It's a performance car. I don't think they want to like sell it as their 918, which is a hypercar. But it's just a very, very good performance Porsche, and it's a very good Porsche that just happens to be electric.
I've heard that the center of gravity is low. Is that
it is low, lower than a 911 actually, the lowest in the Porsche lineup.
Is it a hatchback like the Panamera or a sedan or what is it?
It is. Yeah, it's a trunk. It's a regular trunk because
it's traditional sedan.
It's a traditional sedan. So you have the front storage in the front, a frunk as you may call it, which is actually slightly smaller than a 911 because of the electric motor up front. Right. And then you go to the back, and it's actually pretty big. You can fit 2 full-size golf bags in there, which is what they said was the range they were shooting for in America because
it's got a beautiful coupish roof. Now, did you fit in it?
Yeah, I sat in the back, and in America they'll have the glass roof, which is the standard roof. I fit fine back there. I mean, headroom's a little bit tight, but I'm also 6'3". I'm taller than the average person.
I haven't heard anybody talk about price.
No pricing.
Has anybody got a guess? Is this a $200,000 car, $150,000? I mean, a standard 911 is now $100,000.
Nobody even mentioned the word of price.
Okay.
It was all about horsepower and performance.
I have to say, next to a Tesla model, I think this has been the most anticipated electric car that I can think of.
Just one more thing I wanted to say about it before we move on to the 911. We sat in, and actually we were the first ones to see even Garrick didn't see the
production interior. Yeah,
and it's pretty wild looking. The screen, the IP doesn't have a hood over it, where basically every car you have like a sun screen over the top. This is it's not OLED, but it's actually a curved, which to their knowledge is the first curved IP in the industry.
Digital IP.
It's fully digital, but like uses analog touches, so it looks like it's analog, but it's actually digital. There's actually touch features on the outside of it. And then you have your center screen, a 10.9-inch center screen, and then an optional 10.9-inch passenger screen, which has all the functionality of the other one, but it's just for the passenger to use because they realize that the driver might want navigation up all the time, but they want the passenger wants to listen to music or change some of the other settings.
But with no hood, glare. I mean, I guess
I asked about that.
Yeah.
That was one of the first things I asked about. They claim that because of the curved shape and the way that their screen technology is, that their glare is not a problem.
Wow. All right, why don't you tell us the more earthbound 911 Carrera?
I don't know how much more earthbound
it
is because we're talking 2.6 seconds to 60 in a Taycan. I hit 3 seconds flat in a 911. Yeah. So, I compared this 911, and everybody else can chime in because I think we all drove it. I compared it to the GTS of the 991 generation because around a racetrack, I mean, it's as solid as it gets. And this is really just a step above an entry-level 911 Carrera.
Yeah, well, it is the only one you
right
don't
now,
have the base. Yeah, the base is not out. They make you buy the S first this time around. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's one of those cars you drive and then you sit around the next couple of hours trying to find one thing that you don't like about it.
3-liter turbo 6, 443 horsepower, 8-speed PDK.
Yeah, so they added a gear. It was 7-speed before, now it's an 8-speed, which I found at Summit Point where we drove it on the big course. I actually left it shift itself for a couple of reasons. Didn't necessarily like the feel of the paddle shifters, and the gearing was just odd. I think it was because I haven't driven this specific transmission on this track. So I just couldn't find my gearing the way I wanted it to. But it did so well on its own. I didn't feel the need to trigger any shit.
It knows better than you do.
Yeah.
Did it surprise you with mid-corner gear changes or anything else?
Yeah, there was a ton of them. That's because there's 8 gears, so it's like constantly doing something. Are you saying like surprised me as in I wasn't ready for it, or it was so good that it...
Like you weren't ready for it. It threw you off your mark.
Of course, early on, the first like maybe handful of laps, I'm getting used to it. But yeah, once you get used to it, and it's just consistent. I mean, if there was a mid-corner upshift on one of the tight S's on the first lap, there was the same exact shift 10 laps later, 20 laps later.
They're really consistent.
As long as I'm driving somewhat consistent.
Well, how do we transition from this, both those Porsches, to our next car? One of the things we pride ourselves here at MotorWeek is basically stepping back from each vehicle and putting it in its own class. We're now going to talk about the 2020 Nissan Versa. So we've gone from a 3-liter turbo H6 to a 1.6-liter normally aspirated I4. 122 horsepower.
Yeah, baby.
So, it's like
all those ponies.
Almost a fourth, down 114 pound-feet of torque. A CVT.
Yeah, that takes about 70 horsepower out of it right there.
However, when I went out to drive it for the first time, what struck me is here's another example of why the mid-size sedan is dying. This was a subcompact. It looks as big as I recall the last Sentra compact looking, if not a little larger. And you could be mistaken if you're more than a couple hundred feet away thinking this is quite a large car.
Yeah.
Now, this particular one we have in for testing is their 4-door. I was pretty impressed. They've revamped the interior. It still has a lot of manual controls, but the Versa has always had, among its class, a lot of available technology, and this one's got all the newest automated safety features you could find. So I was pretty impressed.
I remember when the Versa Note came out, that was like you could get a round view monitor,
and you couldn't get it
for
on
like
anything else.
$18,000. Yeah, and it's like you still can't get $80,000 luxury cars with it. Yeah. So that thing was way ahead of its time. It used to be the cheapest car you could buy. It still starts at $14,700. I can't believe that's right, but.
That is. So I actually wrote that down. That was a 5-speed manual, lowest possible.
Well, yeah,
good luck finding one, but
but I think the Mitsubishi Mirage is like $13,995. So
I think you're right.
That one's still cheaper, but
there's still there's a 5-door and a 4-door, right?
I'm not sure if the 5-door is coming back.
We'd have to ask Stephanie on that one because she actually went to the event.
But I know they're not. If it does come back, they're not calling it the Note anymore. I did hear that. But
right now, I think it's just the 4-door Versa.
I'm sure they'll have a 5.
I can't believe they won't have that.
But the one we have in is like $20,000. So
wow, a lot of money.
It's far from the base model, but it's a decent car.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to go from what we were just talking about to this one, and I think we have that. Every auto journalist,
but
I think
that's part of our job is to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I am actually fine with how it drives. I mean, I actually enjoyed driving it on a back road the other day. It feels really light. You can toss it around and not have to worry about getting into too much trouble. So, it's for transportation and for the type of buyer that is likely going to buy this. You can't beat the tech for the price, honestly.
Yeah, it was pretty quiet. I mean, it was great. If if you're the kind of buyer that buys a vehicle as an appliance that you want to drive back and forth every day, it's very comfortable and it would be a good choice.
Nissan always has comfortable seats.
They do.
Yeah,
Zero gravity.
Right now it's only in the sedan, the one we have, but I'm sure they've got probably something else waiting in the wings. But pretty impressed for the money. I think everybody agrees. Okay, we're going to move on now to a little something different. I basically set you up before Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson, for those of you that may not catch all of our program, he is our motorcycle expert, and he's had a Ducati that's a little devilish, so take it away.
Yeah, the Diavel 1260S. If you remember when the Diavel first came out, it was kind of cruiser-ish. Ducati wouldn't call it a cruiser, but the cruisers are the biggest sellers here in the U.S., and it had every aspect of their, high performance bikes in a much more comfortable package. And a couple years later, then they actually made one called the X Diavel, which was even more cruiserish. Anyway, this is the second generation of the Diavel, and pretty much the same as the first. Is insanely fast, but in a very comfortable daily driver package. It's designed at older riders who tired of folding themselves around sport bikes, but still want that acceleration feel and a lot of the performance. It's a great bike. Starts at $20,000. Obviously, that's pricey, but Ducati they're kind of like the Subaru of the two-wheeled world. Their sales are going up month over month for years now, much like Subaru has in the car segment. And a lot of it is just because offering things like this, you just can't get anywhere else.
All right, I'm not a biker, as you know. I nearly killed myself on them. I thought this bike.
That's all part of it, John. So you are a biker.
Bikers do that.
I think this is one of the most beautiful, striking bikes I have ever seen. But you said that not everybody.
Yeah, it's funny when you said that. It's like a lot of people are very anti the looks. It's really hard to describe. It's like a Batmobile,
Italian
cycle,
style,
but it's got a lot of Italian flair to it. A lot of most people don't realize Ducati's actually owned by Audi, so they pioneered all the LED lighting stuff. So it's got tons of cool LED lighting stuff. It's got a really small TFT gauge panel, but it's almost just like Audi cars. It's like packed full of so much info. You think it would be hard to read or hard to use, but it's just super simple.
Can you? What does it compete against? BMWs?
It's hard to. The BMW doesn't really have anything. There's a whole like power cruiser, like the Harley V-Rod when that was out there. Cruisers that add a lot more performance, but this kind of goes at it from the other direction. It's a high performance sport bike that just made a little cruiser-ish.
Would you buy this bike if you could?
I mean, I'd buy one of every bike if I could.
Right.
This would be in my top, maybe five. Top five.
That's pretty high praise.
It wouldn't be
like. Are you thinking because you want to go fast? Do you like the style? Like, what is it that puts it in your top five? Because
it's just an amazing amount of performance and a comfortable bike you can ride every day. And it's got riding modes that you can, it becomes docile if you want to be docile. Sport mode is hyper aggressive.
Cool.
And it just sounds like a Ferrari. So
yeah.
Sounds like a Ferrari.
I need to hear it because
go.
I came into your office yesterday and almost right after he said he liked it, and I was like, I don't really like the way it looks. Just kind of, I think the proportion. I'm not a huge bike person either, but the proportions are kind of weird. Like I mentioned, the fuel tank looks massive on it.
But it's more than a fuel tank. It's got air scoops on both sides of it that feed right into the fuel injection. So it's not all tank.
Thanks, Brian. I think it's kind of cool to actually talk about two wheels on the podcast once in a while. We don't do that often enough, and especially something as so unusual. Okay, lightning round. 30 seconds. We have to discuss a topic, and maybe Greg will hit the bell, and maybe he won't. We have a recent feature on MotorWeek that talks about just how much traffic there is out there. And probably this is not a great big surprise to anybody, but you might be surprised at some of the numbers. According to AAA, Americans spend 70 billion, that's B, hours behind the wheel each year, and most of that time is stuck in traffic. So the question is maybe to this group, is it going to get worse? Do you think it'll ever get better? Is there anything out there that may solve it? What as a nation we need to do? This is we talk every week about how much fun it is to drive, but it sure ain't no fun sitting in traffic.
Well, the more time I sit in traffic, the more time I have to play on my phone. So I'm okay with it. No, but I have another. I don't know if it's going to get. I imagine it's going to get worse. Everything gets worse. Nothing gets better, right?
Man, that's a great outlook on life.
We're on a positive note.
But I have a different traffic type issue. I don't know why I would use the word problem, but with everyone's GPS and Waze and everything, it's opened up a lot of ways
That's why they call it that.
That people didn't use, like little roads through neighborhoods that people would drive around because they didn't know it cut through to another road. So you have these quiet residential streets with 25-mile-an-hour speed limits and kids playing all over the place. And now all of a sudden, it's a highway every morning because people are cutting through driving 60 to get to work. Because of all the traffic that everyone's sitting on the other roads. So it's really changed things as far as neighborhoods. I think maybe
that's why we're seeing so many speed bumps crop up.
Robinson's just out there trying to mow his grass shirtless like the rest of us, and he's got a whole line of traffic going in front of his house.
Like, what the heck?
There's an interesting screensaver that's been popping up on my computer the last couple of days, and it was talking about some of the traffic jams in Italy. And unlike the U.S., the Italians actually seem to be building roads and bridges and so forth to kind of alleviate it. We've not seen any movement. I mean, the point of our piece, one of the comments from the AAA expert was, the federal government's not really doing anything to alleviate it because building, more highways is actually very unpopular with a lot of people that are environmentalists. Yet that's what we all need. And of course, it takes years to build a highway. And by the time you build it, it's overloaded. So short term, I personally think if we ever see a world where we've got a lot of autonomous vehicles and ride sharing, maybe that'll help. But it comes down to you and me and everybody else. We don't want to give up our cars. That's really what it is.
Yeah,
so.
That's true.
That's a good point. I don't see it getting any better soon. In theory, like you said, autonomy should fix it.
Well, it should help.
Could help,
Yeah.
Because the idea is
that's what I'm saying. In theory,
Positive Brian Robinson.
That you would have the cars that if they're all synchroed, and we're talking maybe 50 years from now, they would follow each other so close you could pack more cars in.
Well, and a big part of it too is just waiting for accidents. Accidents happen all the time. I can't tell you how many times I'm driving home on 70, which is just a straight highway, and people find a way to crash into each other. And run off the
It is amazing. And it's usually somebody either on their phone or just in too big a hurry. There was an interesting survey years ago that said most traffic jams are caused by 5% of the drivers. That's they're either going.
Well, we need to find them
and get them off.
Get them in autonomous cars.
Yeah,
that's the people.
We better get out of this.
All right, viewer question from David. He's a longtime viewer. Thank you, David, very much. And he has an observation related to a complaint. David bought a new Accord and found that the front passenger seat was miserable to sit in. In all of his years of watching MotorWeek, he's never seen us sit in the passenger seat. Why is that? Well, that's a very good question.
Quick, easy answer, too. It's hard to drive from there.
I can remember a couple of when a certain, it was a Honda Odyssey came out. And we raved about the vehicle. It was probably 2-3 generations ago. And we actually had one in here for a year. And on some trip, my wife took over the driving, and I got in the passenger seat, and I couldn't believe it. It was cramped. There was a hump in the floor. It was uncomfortable. And it's like, David, I'm afraid you're right. It's often up to our spouses or our children who end up riding in the passenger seats because we're too busy in the driver's seat trying to figure out what the vehicle's like.
Yeah,
it's a good point.
That's exactly why I picked this question, because I think he raises a fair point. We have our long-term RAV4 hybrid, which I really like, but there is a difference in the front driver's seat and the passenger seat, because the passenger seat is mechanically adjusted while the driver's seat is nice, and you would never know until, like you said, your wife or your husband or whoever.
And it doesn't have as much adjustment.
Yeah, not as I drove it today, and I sat in the passenger seat of that car today. And
while you were driving it,
that was really impressive.
That's what cruise control's for.
Your arms are longer than I thought.
But there is a noticeable difference between being in the driver's seat and being a passenger. So he definitely raises a good point.
What a technical answer beyond Robinson's snarky answer. So when you're shooting television and you see the driver get in from the driver's side, if you were to flip around and shoot the passenger side, it actually kind of breaks one of the rules of filming where you cross over the line and then you're looking in the wrong direction. So that I really kind of hate to say it, there's a little bit of it.
That's why they always put a reverse angle on during the football games.
Yeah, so
we could do that. I think we should add it to a road test.
I actually
and
think
call it the
David
test.
Yeah.
I think it really is a fair point.
It is,
David. We will be more mindful of that in the future, and if we don't show it, we'll try and work in some comments when we find something really egregious. There's one aspect about this that we haven't gotten into rant and rave, so maybe we'll transition to that. I am absolutely bugged by a manufacturer, I don't care who it is, Toyota, anybody, and they give you a top trim level, and they've got every bell and whistle on this car that you could possibly imagine. But because of the market, some marketing guy has decided it's in, they don't give you power adjustments or as much power adjustment on the passenger seat as you have on the driver. What is the big deal about putting height control on the passenger side? Passengers don't like to either sit way low or way high like anybody else, same as a driver, and it just drives me crazy. And I've asked when cars have been redone, and he asked the manufacturer, "Oh, why don't you have it over there?" "Well, this particular segment doesn't have it." But why?
Yeah, that doesn't answer my question.
Doesn't answer the question. You could basically be a market leader and force everybody else to have it.
I asked a similar question one time on a to be unnamed brands event, and one of the engineers, and his answer was, "Well, that would require a lot of additional engineering."
What? For the stuff
You've
that
got
already have
a mechanism for the seat.
Isn't that what you guys do? Is additional engineering? I don't know.
Well, the buttons have to go on the other side of the seat.
Flipping the motor 100
Hey, maybe David has helped us find a new soapbox. Equal treatment for the passenger.
We can get a hashtag trending about this.
Oh yes,
passengers.
Get ready,
Passengers
Instagram.
unite.
Yeah.
Front seat passengers unite. Demand equal treatment.
We'll find it.
Gosh, there's probably even a lawsuit in there somewhere.
Oh, boy.
Thank you, David. And thanks, everybody, for listening to our MotorWeek podcast number 122. I'd like to thank everybody around the table today, Brian Robinson, Greg Carlos, and Kyle Scanlon. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for watching MotorWeek on public television stations around the country and on the Motor Trend Cable Network. Thanks to our audio engineer, Jim Bigwood. Of course, Greg Carlos is our producer, and our podcast creator, Bob Mixter. Till next time, I'm John Davis. Thanks for all of your support and for listening in, and thanks for just being a part of MotorWeek.
Passengers are people too.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, RockAuto.com, and State Farm. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at MotorWeek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.